Good morning, Revolution. Today we are live from Minneapolis covering the general strike. And the general strike has expanded across this whole country. Good morning, Revolution. Today we are live. The general strike has gone across the whole of this country. And over 215 cities are doing support actions. And in New York City, for instance, there is a ice out march in New York, and we are lucky to have Colton here with us from Minneapolis, and we have Pooja and Ray, who are activists in support of what's happening in Minnesota. So I just would appreciate. Oh, I want to take 1 second here. I just want to to talk a little bit about the differences in the way people are looking at this. Trump is saying that the people who are protesting are agitators and insurrectionists, and that the ICE agents are patriots, whereas Ilhan Omar is saying that ICE is unconscionable and reprehensible and represents state violence. So there's very different views of what's going on out here, and I am looking forward to a good discussion. So can we start off with just a 30-second introduction? Who you are, Colton.
I'm Colton. I'm a member of the Twin Cities Club of the Communist Party, and I'm here at Delta, at Terminal 1 at the Minneapolis airport, where there is a civil disobedience action right now.
Thank you. Pooja.
Hello, my name is Pooja. I use she, her pronouns. I'm in Colorado, and I'm a union organizer, and more importantly, a radical and revolutionary mother.
Thank you. Ray.
I'm Ray Siqueiros, generations from Tucson, Arizona, the newly elected education director for the Tucson Club of the Communist Party, USA.
Thank you. So Colton, let's start with you. Why a general strike? Why are people upset in Minneapolis, and what's happening today?
So Minneapolis because our neighbors are getting kidnapped. Since Actually, since all the way back in December, there's been ICE activity, and since January, there's been and abused and beaten. And just a couple of days ago, actually, a 5-year-old was used as bait to abduct their father after the 5-year-old was done with preschool. ICE used him as bait to get him and his father on a plane um, to a detention center in Texas. So we're seeing like this kind of terrible horrors that ICE has been inflicting on Minneapolis, the Twin Cities metro, and broader Minnesota. And that's why there's a general strike today. That's why there's been actions all week against different corporations and businesses who have either been working with ICE or haven't been speaking out enough against ICE, which is why we're here today why I'm here today at Terminal 1 in Minneapolis, where we're seeing a civil disobedience action um, by a coalition of labor, community, and faith leaders, including the different Delta employees who are in the unionizing effort and are organized, including the Teamsters, the machinists, and flight attendants. I'm sorry, it's getting a little loud. There's some people walking by with some stuff, but yeah. So we into all the different terrible things that are happening to my neighbors. Just a couple days ago too. Sorry, I'm might tear up a little bit. My sister's neighborhood where she lives in, it was gassed with not tear gas, but a different kind of gas that can actually give people cancer, right? And it really like it just makes me really scared for my neighbors and for people who like I know are at these protests that I love and care about that are trying to help keep these other neighbors that I also love and care about and are immigrants and who don't deserve to get chipped off and treated like they are. So yeah, I think I covered some of that. But
Thank you, Colton. That gives a real concrete sense of what's going on and and who's involved. So you're talking about a coalition of labor, civil rights, religious organizations, other kinds of people's organizations. Everybody's in motion, and it includes small businesses as well, so, which is, I think, very important component because it broadens out uh, who is involved. Pooja, you mentioned the question of hotels and how hotels are playing a part in this. And I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and talk a little bit about the importance of labor and labor support for what's going on and the breadth of that support.
Sure. I think, something that's interesting that's happening, I think, all over the country, although the focus is definitely, understandably, rightfully on Minneapolis right now, is that there is pushback coming from the community in all sorts of different ways, right? Whether that's the hotels that ICE agents are staying at, or whether that is rental car places where the ICE agents who are all, not from the places that they're terrorizing, right? That they're renting cars. There's a coordinated effort, I think, going on to try and get folks out of where they're staying by making it really uncomfortable where they're sleeping, the cars that they're picking up, all of these sorts of things. I think that is probably one of the most interesting things that's happening with this current moment is the huge amount of coalition happening, coalition building that's going on, right? Whether that's through labor, whether that's through community partners like churches, whether that's just through the grandma on in the neighborhood being like, this is horrible, and I don't want I don't want my neighbors to get kidnapped, right? I think that's the really fascinating moment that we're in right now. Just seeing people come together in this really radical way that hasn't happened in a really long time. Last time there was a general strike in this country was in Minneapolis, right? And then before that was in Seattle. So definitely Minneapolis is an interesting place for this to pop off, I think. And another interesting fact I learned is that Civil War, the Minneapolis held a really important part in the Civil War by starting out to be like one of the first places where the war really popped off, right? So I think the history is only ever repeating itself as I understand it. So it is a very fascinating moment. I think for labor specifically, this is an interesting moment because it's a real which side are you on moment. Like it's time for labor to either put up or shut up, right? There's been a really long history where labor just kind of lets the community go or doesn't really go and join the fight. But I think right now, particularly in Minneapolis, you're seeing a really interesting federation building of the different unions coming together. I think even in other parts of the country, we're thinking about how can we coalesce labor movements and unions to really fight back against what's happening. I think it's really fun as a union and labor organizer to see the members get engaged and get involved in this moment because it's like, wow, they're ready, like these folks are ready to go defend their neighbors, they're ready to defend themselves, and they're ready to do what's necessary to take back our country, right? So regardless of what's happening in specific cities or not, overall, there's a very giant trend, I think, of coalition building between labor and community allies, which I've been saying for my entire career as a union organizer, that that's the thing that needs to happen. Also, my baby's here, so you might hear her in the background.
We love babies to be here and join in our conversation. Ray, Pooja was talking about the history of Minneapolis in struggle. And one of the points in Minneapolis history is the George Floyd uprising.
Right.
And and I'm wondering, and I know that you live in Arizona, that you're not in Minneapolis itself, but I'm wondering what if you have any thoughts in terms of the importance of the George Floyd uprising and the importance of the kind of coalition building that Pooja was talking about and that Colton was talking about in terms of uh, how it fits into our current time and the current struggles again for democracy, for for the people's voice in our society, and for building working class power from a historical perspective. I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts about that.
Well, obviously, man, the George Floyd situation, especially seeing the video where he was clearly murdered unnecessarily and tortured before he died. That set us off, and it's real similar with what happened to our sister Renee. Being shot and murdered, and so it put brutality, it put oppression of our African American sisters and brothers in front and center. Now, for us here in Tucson, historically, black and brown, we've united, but Chicanos out here, in particular, and Native people, have been targeted by the Border Patrol, by the police, have been killed, have been murdered, and so that gave us impetus to really focus on how our struggles are intertwined, our struggle for Chicano equality, for Native sovereignty and equality, for African American equality, and for worker justice is entwined. Now, one thing I just want to add, I'm really, really proud of our national vice president of the AFT, American Federation of Teachers, that I think are Evelyn de Jesus, and her role in fighting for equality, for Latino rights. And I'm a member of AFT. I'm a retiree of AFT. I'm a longtime member of both unions. But one thing I just want to say, people need to remember that Latinos, we are a mixture of all kinds of races, and most of us, I will argue, are native. We are indigenous. The border crossed us. We didn't cross the border. The border crossed us, especially here in Arizona. So, this whole thing of immigration, don't get me wrong, we fight for immigrant rights. We have Jobs with Justice out here with Comrade Steve and others that have done great work building that labor community coalition. So labor is a stabilizing force, especially for young people. It helps. It's a great resource of experience and money even. I hate to say the money word, but it is. I mean, what other force exists to challenge the ruling class and corporations? I mean, churches are great, but labor is us, and we gotta fight for labor to be in the forefront of our struggles.
Thank you. So, Colton, that was a moving call for solidarity and coalition building in support of what's going on in this general strike. And one of the things uh, that you have been living through is watching this coalition come into being and watching people come out every day, day after day after day, in peaceful protest. And I think it's important to say that the people are peaceful. The violence is coming from the state, from ICE. And what I am wondering is how you feel uh, the the historical precedents that Pooja was talking about in terms of other general strikes in Minneapolis. Also, in terms of the more recent uprising around George Floyd's vicious murder. Um, and how do you feel that these things have contributed so that today's uprising would you say that today's uprising grows out of that historically fertile ground of struggle? And if so, do you have any thoughts on how that unfolded and what's been built?
Yeah, I would definitely say that what we're seeing, the resistance we're seeing today, the labor unions coming together, community coming together, faith leaders coming together. I think that is 100%, um, built and has come from the roots of resistance that we've had in the past, um, for sure. Especially I think a lot about how with George Floyd and with the election of Trump and with the rise of fascism, like Minneapolis has always stood against that and has always either voted against that or organized against violence from the police back during George Floyd um, and has organized to make sure that that we don't vote for Trump, and we always um, that is 100% coming from our history, and I think that what we see today, the um, the labor and the coalition with community and faith that is calling for an immediate end to this ICE surge, um, and for justice um, for Renee Good, and for the ICE officers chosen to be held accountable, and for Congress to freeze ICE, publicly calling for Congress to freeze ICE, as well as businesses like Delta to exercise their Fourth Amendment, and refusing to let ICE agents in without judicial warrants. I think that that resistance that we see today um, is the continuation, I would say, of the resistance that we have seen in the past. Um, and that's one thing that the Republicans, conservative capitalist corporations, like they really like, they really hate because they. I know that Trump has talked a lot about how he really wishes, he thinks that he should have won Minnesota, even though that's a bunch of BS. But that idea, in that that Minnesota, should be a red state, and that it should just comply. I think is ahistorical to what we see in history and what we see today as well. And yeah, and it's culminated in this general strike and blackout as well. So yeah.
Well, that's really to the point, and the there is such a trail of death behind the ice, folks. It's there's a focus right now on Renee Good, but there are so many others, both in this country and in El Salvador, in the prisons that were at other places that were shipping people. It's just it's a state brutality unlike anything that I've ever seen in my life on this scale in this country.
Yep.
And Pooja, um, the AFL-CIO just had a civil rights um, conference, and that conference really spoke to the need for change in this country from labor's perspective, and that what's happening in Minnesota is indicative of a broader struggle across the whole of the United States. And that's reflected in the fact that so many cities are doing solidarity actions today in support of our sisters and brothers in Minnesota who are on the front line. So the question I have really is how do you see uh, how do you see labor, which was not originally a leading force against the Trump MAGA regime? How do you see them um, moving forward to be more active in this struggle? And do you think that there are things that are holding them back that that we could address and maybe help to increase engagement?
Yeah, I think I hate to bring up even the term, but it's a moment for a general strike all over the country, right? Um, I generally hate when people talk about general strikes in this context because of all of the backstory and the logistics that have to go into planning a general strike. But this is where the labor movement can be a real guide, right? All union contracts that are actually legally binding contracts are determined by a deadline, right? So you think about the UAW. The UAW was suggesting to try and line up all contracts that people have coming up for May Day 2028, right? So that gives us a deadline or a structure to form our organizing around. I think the greatest thing that the labor movement has, it's like my baby's very excited to be on this call. So the greatest thing that the labor movement has is the ability to build structure and the ability to use union resources and member resources to be able to build out an actual lasting and guiding structure for things like general strikes, right? So I think that's what if we're not doing that now as the labor movement, what are we doing, right? This is the moment for us to rise up. This is the moment for us to um, provide guidance, whether that's in terms of um, training people how to organize, training people how to talk to each other, and uh, actually even providing those bodies, right? So like union members are very interested, I think, in this moment in showing solidarity for each other and showing solidarity for the people in Minneapolis and other places. Because, like, again, Minneapolis has gotten a lot of the limelight, but this stuff has been happening, in Columbus, Ohio. It's been happening all over the place. That I think there is a chance for political retribution, right? So what a lot of what's happening seems in Minneapolis even seems to be political retribution, whether that's for Tim Walz, Ilhan Omar, or all of the other electeds or people in charge that are causing some ruckus in Minneapolis. So anyway, to bring up labor again, I think this is a real moment for labor to show solidarity and also provide their resources and their structure to be able to support the organizing that's happening, right? I think a place where labor at the moment in general in this country, like we're not positioned to be the leaders of this moment, which I think is really interesting because labor should be, I think, a leader in what's happening right now. But there's been, a concentrated effort to change from organizing model labor unions to service model labor unions back in the back few decades, right? But this to me is a real moment where the labor movement can really rise up and try to shift some of that direction, right? Like we can really take direction from the people in the communities that are being impacted by ICE, and really start to support the efforts that are happening there, which I think is what's happening in Minneapolis. As someone who's not there, it seems like a lot of the on the ground organizing is just happening organically from community organizers and people who are actually being directly impacted by what's happening, and then labor is coming in to support. So I think that's the biggest thing that we can do now. Labor has millions and millions of dollars behind it. It is time to use that money to really support the on the ground organizing that's happening all over the country instead of using it for the silly things that labor tends to use our money for. It's a real opportunity for labor in this country, and I think some unions are really starting to see that and are starting to join in, and some unions are kind of waiting to see, I think, what happens. But here's a real call to action for those unions, right? If not now, then when? Like this is the moment. Like y'all really gotta step up.
This is the moment. Labor, but not labor alone. Labor, faith, community organizations all have to step up and fight together and in unified. But Ray, I want to go to you for a moment. There's a, you know, Pooja and Colton were talking about the corporate support for ICE.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to add to that the lawlessness. It's the corporate support for the absolute lawless violence that is going on in Minnesota and other parts of the country. And uh, I want to point towards the arrest recently of Nikema Levy Armstrong, Chantel Allen, and Monique Colors Doty. They were all arrested in a church where the minister is also the head of or some kind of bigwig in ICE, and so they were protesting that. But it also it brings out the way that ICE is kind of intersecting in different ways with different parts of the community, like hotels. They have to rent hotel space. They have to eat, and they like to eat in Mexican restaurants and then arrest everybody. Let's just get real, okay? So, so this lawlessness, this disregard for human dignity, this lack of any feeling for human beings, and on the part of corporations who are supporting this, is, I think, an important vector for struggle. So we have seen the Target boycott, and Target is a supporter of ICE. That has been extremely effective. We are also seeing other boycotts come into being, and I was So there's Target. Have you seen this kind of lawlessness before in terms of the history of the country? And have you seen this kind of focus on corporate fight back to stop the lawlessness and the use of boycotts? I can say South Africa comes, the struggle against apartheid, South Africa comes to mind. But I'm very interested in your thoughts on that.
But I'm glad you mentioned boycotts because I've been teaching for a while the idea that we really, not only as a Chicano community, but as a working class as a whole, have not fully explored boycotts. And Cesar Chavez taught us that the boycott is so effective, the great boycott, for example, right? And boycotts are great because one, you don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to protest. You don't have to go to a meeting. All you got to do is not do something and not spend your money, but do it at the same time towards a corporation or a company, right? Like Target, for example. But they're so effective, and it's a mass approach to targeting our class enemy, the corporations. You save money. People save money. I mean, it's just a great thing that we have yet really the bus boycott, for example, Martin Luther King in Birmingham. So I think that needs to be explored on a mass concentrated level, and I think labor really can teach us how to do that or guide us, as Comrade who just said. I want to say though that with all this lawlessness and reckless abandonment of decency, uh, a lot of people have come to the fore, and a lot of them are white, and that's a new thing for me out here to see more and more white working class people, especially, but more white people in general. At the No Kings protest, the protest we had in Tucson on Wednesday, in conjunction with us, and it's a beautiful thing. It really warmed my heart on Monday at our Martin Luther King march here to see white, black, brown unity across the issues on for Palestine and for against ICE. So the party, I think, and labor have a special role to play in terms of multicultural, multiracial, LGBTQ, younger and older, uh, working class unity, right? Working class, the unity of our class of all colors and especially on this issue of immigration, is the recipe for victory, right? Because and part of that is education. We need to educate each other on our issues, and like I try to do, we are native. We're not. We have gone north and south across this hemisphere from time immemorial. And one last thing, if I may, a lot of us are frustrated. I am, and I'm an old dude, but I know a lot of our young people are very frustrated with this craziness. Really, I don't know how to explain it. I'm beside myself and outraged. But we have to be fighting and show that you can be militant, you can be courageous, and you can be nonviolent. And mass organizing, mass protests, but nonviolent and militant as all hell. And we can do that. Labor especially can help us too.
Thank you. Colton, so you've heard all these things, and but we're really here for you. And one of the things that I'm really interested in is, what does your day look like today? Like, what are you doing, and what's happening around you?
Yeah, for sure. So this morning is the Delta action that I'm currently at right now. Um, I'm not sure how long it's going to go to, but I see there's a lot of police with it looks like different like riot or crowd control gear here. Um, but I plan to be at this until I'm guessing it'll probably be done around like 11 or noon. But it's just I'll be here and also calling for Delta to listen to protesters' demands and actually like step up and resist ICE. And then later today, there's going to be the um, the rally in downtown Minneapolis, the common, a park where the Wolves play and the Minnesota Lynx. Not today, obviously, um, but we're going to be marching there, and then we're going to be having um, the march at 2. And then at 2:30 we're going to have the rally because we're going to try to get people to march and then out of the cold into Target Center where we're going to have a rally and call for um, ICE to get out of Minnesota and for um, uh, the officers who killed Renee Good to be brought to justice and for um, uh, businesses to step up and refuse to let ICE in and other demands as well. So that's going to start at 2 p.m. Um, and yeah, that'll go till 5, and then we'll see what happens. I know I also have beyond that just planning to have a meeting with other comrades, and then also doing some rapid response as well where I can. So just hopping on different signal calls, and then listening to a dispatcher, and coming up with and like going around to legal observe um, and try to stop ICE from abducting our neighbors. That's something that I think someone mentioned a while ago how this we've had like a resistance since George Floyd or mentioned George Floyd, but we've seen this sort of resistance to ICE. I think there's a lot of similarities in um, a lot of things that we kind of learned from when we resisted against George Floyd. One of those is like using signal chats and doing these different um, uh, like calls to and communication with our neighbors and like building kind of that um, like networks and now I think we see it a lot in like using those networks to mobilize against ICE and to mobilize um, to get to places where ICE is active and try to warn our neighbors, what is happening, um, and also to if they are getting abducted, to let them know, what their rights are and like how to, and then beyond that too, like protests will usually sometimes erupt. Although ICE is getting pretty quick in its abduction, so that kind of changes, how legal observers will show up, and also to uh, the peaceful protest thing as well. Like we like the um, Trump thinks that the protesters are not peaceful, but they 100% are. And Eric, I think you mentioned something on how it's ICE that's doing the violence, and that's 100% correct. It's ICE, and um, this is like we know that the best way to resist is to show up peacefully, is to show up nonviolently, like we learned from Martin Luther King, right? And yeah, so that's what I plan on doing today. That's what thousands of people plan on doing today. And that's how we're going to. That's kind of what the day looks like. So I went on a bit of a ramble, but but yeah.
Colton, I'm sorry. J.D. Vance visited Minneapolis recently. He blamed state and local officials for ICE's brutal tactics. And he said that if state and local officials would cooperate with ICE, federal agents wouldn't have to be so violent. And I'm just wondering, Colton, what do you think about that statement?
Um, One, I think like he got up off the couch to come here and to say that, like, I think it's a load of BS. I think if we comply, there is more violence. I think the the path to get um, to peace will be by resisting. If we comply, like there's just going to be more and more. It's just going to be easier for ICE to kind of um, do these violent actions that they're pulling off. I think that I just think it's total BS, and I think that um, the reason that Vance says that is because he wants to see less resistance from protesters. He wants to see us not stand up for our neighbors and just be like, oh, nothing is happening. Like this is normal. Like this is fine. And uh, I don't know. I just it's just I think it's just funny that he says that, and that's just so obviously not the case and not what is needed. And but he has motives. He wants to see Minnesota, all of our immigrants get rounded up, and he wants to see these Gestapo like tactics keep going. He wants to see ICE um, you know keep doing this violence that uh, that they really want to do, and this racist violence as well. Like um, he's all for those things, and I'm sure that if we talked to him and he had the mask off and we got to hear what his true thoughts were, he would be just tell us honestly, like, yeah, no, he wants more violence against protesters, but obviously that's speculation. But yeah, I hate that guy.
Um, so I'm going to ask everybody if they could make some closing remarks before we go to our mailbag. So Pooja, do you have any thoughts that you'd like to share on what we've been talking about?
Yeah, I think first of all, fuck Donald Trump and fuck ICE is where I'm starting from. I think as a mom this week, I've been really impacted by the stories of the children being used, particularly the 5-year-old that was used as bait for his parents to be rounded up by ICE. I think first of all, I just really want to say like what is happening in this country, and I really want to give a moment to the overwhelming I think fear that a lot of people are feeling, and a lot of families and immigrants are feeling. Like this is a horrible time in our country, and it's not it's not dissimilar to other times in this country. This country is founded on white supremacy and genocide, so it's not a shock that we are sitting in this moment trying to genocide native born children of this continent from this place, right? So let me just give voice to that. Like if you're feeling freaked out, if you're feeling like I don't know what to do, like I think that's a very common thing that a lot of people are feeling. There's nothing wrong with you, and there's a lot of ways to get involved that are less that might work with where you're feeling right now. And if you're not feeling like you can get involved right now, that's also okay. Like it's also okay to just see what's happening and support in the ways that you can. So let me start there. Let me also say that um, this is a moment for the labor movement to wake up. This is a moment for the labor movement to stand with our organizations that are fighting the front lines. This is a moment for the labor movement to think about how can we use our resources and our bodies and our people to really support our neighbors and really support each other. And that means looking beyond any sort of potential nonsense that you might be feeling about, should these people be complying with what with what law enforcement is saying? Should these people be doing this? Should they be doing that? There is no what we should be doing. I want everyone to understand the moment that we're in right now. We're never going back to the way that it was before. And the faster that you come to terms with that, the better. You have to understand we are in fascism. A lot of people, I think, are like hedging this a little bit and saying, oh, we're slipping down the slippery slope. We're going this way. There is no slippery slope. We are in fascism now. We have to think about what are the ways that we can fight back. We have to look at places like Minneapolis as I think a lot of places like where I live in Denver, there isn't like a huge ICE presence right now. Like they're not fighting as much right now. So I think what is important for places like us now is to look at what Minneapolis is doing and see the lessons that they're learning and start the on the ground organizing already in our neighborhoods, in our cities to fight against what's surely going to happen in as many places as they can afford to do it, as many places as they can get volunteers and workers signed up for ICE to go in, right? So, how can we build those community networks? How can labor start supporting those networks already? How can we start organizing our neighborhoods? How can we start these group chats? How can we really start training people on their rights? Like, do people understand that when ICE comes to your door, don't answer it? Don't answer the door. Don't open it, right? Let them go through the process of breaking down your door. Make them come back with an actual judicially signed warrant, even though they're being told that they don't need a warrant. That's bullshit. They do need a warrant. They need a judicially signed warrant to come into your house. Do not let your fear or your desire to try and make things I think there's a desire for people to try to work with law enforcement when they show up because that's what we're trained to do in this country, right? Like we're trained obedience. We're trained, okay, you got to listen to them, you got to comply. You don't open the door, don't talk to them, don't listen to them, don't do everything that you can to resist these little things where you feel like maybe you can get away with it just by being good or being right or doing or saying the right thing. You cannot. We are not in that moment. You really, really need to get trained on how to interact with law enforcement. Don't trust law enforcement. Don't trust anybody that says they want to trust law enforcement. They don't understand the moment that we're in. All of this to say, and like if you're a parent right now, dude, it's so hard. I get it. I can't stand looking at all these babies getting thrown. Like I can't. So I think we also got to think about how can we organize like groups of people that we have never organized before. Like how do we organize the moms? How do we organize stay-at-home moms? I know a lot of stay-at-home moms now. They're mad. They're upset about what's going on. So it's like, how do we, as the party, particularly, get in and try to organize these groups of people that maybe are not organized or maybe scared right now? So anyway, I feel like I rambled a lot, but just have heart, get organized, and you know, we'll beat the fascists.
Thank you. Ray, thoughts before we go to the mailbag?
You know, we had Joe Hill, right? He said, "Don't mourn, organize, reach out, resist that temptation to turn inward, talk to your neighbors." We've gone about a month and a half ago, a group of us, mostly young people, and it wasn't just the party; it was other socialist minded youth that we organized a door to door, well organized, and we had little cards with whistles, know your rights, and just initiate dialogue with your neighbors. And we picked I was very happy that we picked the neighborhood that I grew up in on the south side, and a mostly Chicano neighborhood. And for me, it was like a reunion, even though a lot of the neighbors I don't know them, but I grew up there, and so we share a lot of cultural and experiential ideas. But the neighbors were willing to talk to us, man, willing to talk, because a lot of us Chicanos who are quote citizens, we know we're the targets. We've always been the target. It's just more obvious now. They use our Mexicano brothers and sisters to attack us, but we are the target. Another thing I want to share, and I think it's very important because the party has a lot of knowledge and history and experience, and we need to tap into that. And Marxist.org has a lot written by our beloved comrade Henry Winston. And Winnie has a great article called "The Meaning of San Rafael." And those of you who grew up when I did, you know what I'm talking about it. But if you haven't, take a look at it. I think Winnie lays out the approach that we got to take, especially when in light of this fascist violence and JD Vance. They are the violence, but they're experts at turning reality upside down. And most, unfortunately, too many people are not critical thinkers, or don't they lack the intestinal fortitude to challenge that lie. So we got to know that they want to twist stuff and make us the violent people, so that the force of the national government can be unleashed uh, even more than it already has. So we have to be disciplined and clear and strategic in how we organize. And I think the meaning of San Rafael gives a good understanding of how to approach this unique moment. And of course, I'm really happy to be here, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Colton,
Yeah.
before we go to our mailbag, what's your thoughts? Go ahead.
100% agree with what Puja and Ray said. We gotta be talking to, and we gotta be connecting with neighbors who, usually like wouldn't be, involved in this sort of thing. I think honestly, like we gotta let this moment like radicalize us in a lot of our neighbors too. Like that's the only way that we're going to, get people involved and get people who want to actually stand up and do something. I have a when I do rapid response, like a lot of times, like I'm working with people who would like never have gotten involved in this, like you know, soccer moms, folks who like are out in the suburbs, folks who like usually wouldn't think about this sort of thing. So we 100% have to mobilize these folks and talk to these folks, and like moments of crisis like this one like are going to do that for sure. Um, and definitely important to this is an attack on you know workers, but it's an attack on specific people, right? It's like Ray said, this is attack on Latinos, this is attack on Somalis in Minnesota, this is attack on anyone wants to get out of the country, right? Who's not just they don't want in their country, and that's not something that we're about. We want to stand in solidarity with everyone. We want to stand in solidarity with our immigrant brothers and sisters, and you know we want to see we need to continue to keep rising up how we have to continue to keep having general strikes, having these actions, continue to build unions and communities and faith leaders towards uh, building up this people's front against fascism for sure. And yeah, um, I guess fuck ICE, fuck Donald Trump, fuck U.S. imperialism, and the growing fascism in the United States. And um, you know, I stand in solidarity with you all, and I know you guys stand in solidarity with me. And that's what we got to need. That's what we need. Yeah, yeah, I see your shirt, right? Yeah, 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 yeah. That's 100%. So I really appreciate all this, and I know that the workers will win at the end of the day. I know they'll win. I know it in my heart. I know it in my soul. And I know that's what's going to happen. And that's why I'm in the Communist Party, and that's why I think a lot more people are going to start going more toward the left as well. So yeah, straight from the soul. Hopefully my those thoughts made sense, but like I'm fired up now.
Well, I think we're all fired up with you, and I am sure that the workers are going to win. That is absolutely sure. We have a mailbag question. What are the chances or ways to remove this Trump administration from power? Are we stuck with just the vote? Um, Colton, do you have a thought on that?
Hell no, we are not just stuck with the vote. You know, we have the power of our labor. We can withhold it. You know, that's what a general strike is about. And I think, you know, we don't do, you know, or don't like do any organizing of it. Like, yeah, we're not going to get rid of Trump. But you know, we're going to have to come together and I mean, we've seen it. We've talked about it. Just organizing our neighbors to resist. But also, you know, we got to organize them to also realize that the only path forward um, is by refusing to, you know, work with these machines that basically we don't want to play by the rules, right? We got to do something else. The only way to do something else uh, is by to you know do organizing and organize where you can in your communities, in your neighborhoods, in your workplaces, in your you know places of worship. But also, you know, not to say that elections aren't important; they're very important. You know, they're a way to block fascists from getting power. But there's also other ways too where we can resist that we 100% have to utilize, or else you know we're never going to get out of this. So
Pooja, thoughts on the mailbag question?
Yeah, I think first of all, vote. Voting is a tactic. You know, don't get wrapped up in what your vote means. Don't get wrapped up in like, oh, I got to be most radical and revolutionary. This is the way that my identity is shown through my vote. Vote strategically. Vote what makes sense. Vote the fascists out if you can. Um, that said, the actual only tool that we ever have is organized working class power, right? So that is the actual real tool that we have to wield and the real tool that we have to use to get ourselves prepared. So obviously you can, I mean, this whole conversation has been about a tool outside of voting to try and get the fascists out of power, general striking, using labor power, using community alliances. um, I think a thing that people are going to have to start getting comfortable with is that there actually isn't a moment of being comfortable moving forward. Like you have to get involved in the ways that you can. You have to, if you're raising children, do it in a radical and revolutionary way, right? If you are getting out there on the streets, do it in an organized and radical and revolutionary way. Be strategic in the ways that you show up. Be strategic in the ways that you use your money. Be strategic in the ways that you use your power. Um, Understand that the MAGA stuff, all these people, like they're in power right now, so it seems really overwhelming, but they actually have a very small mandate. They are not popular. Their ideas are not broadly popular amongst the general working class. And even the ones that are MAGA aligned, I think, are looking at this moment kind of being like, what is going on? Like, this is not necessarily what I wanted to do. Some of them are really into what's happening. So we're probably not going to spend time organizing those people, the fascists and the Nazis. But outside of that, there are people who are looking at this moment like, this is ridiculous. Like, this is not what I want. This is not what I voted for. And it is a moment for us to try and build broad unity amongst people that we may not have thought about building broad unity with before. The Hillary Clinton liberals, right? Like the Rahm Emanuel liberals. Why is he coming back into the fray again? Right? Where is he coming from? And all of these other people that like we may not necessarily 100% align with on ideology. This is a moment to move past that, right? We really have to try and build broad bands of unity as much as possible. And that is actually the greatest power that we have, using our organized networks to general strike, using our organized networks to support people who are striking, doing jail support, doing immigration support, doing this work that I think is so fascinating in Minneapolis, where people are just chasing ICE out of gas stations, chasing ICE out of restaurants, chasing ICE out of hotels. Show them where they're not welcome in our communities, right? That's the most important thing that we can be doing. Get these motherfucking fascists out of our cities, out of our neighborhoods, and out of our lives. And that doesn't require the vote.
Thank you. Ray, thoughts on the mailbag question?
It's an excellent question, first of all, and I just want to remind people before I get off. For oppressed people, unions have been one of the greatest advancement in our standard of living and quality of life. And I was fortunate to grow up in a mining. My dad was a copper miner in the United Steel Workers Local 6705, and that taught me unity of the working class. So unions. Second of all, you know. Uh, gosh, the mass struggle, mass organizing is the only thing that, if you study history, really changes anything. It's the mass movement. Yes, the vote's important. Don't get me wrong. I vote and I take my vote very, very importantly, but it's never just the vote. It's just like other comrades said. It's part of the process. Um, so we got to look at the elections coming up. Come on, I think that's an important thing to look at. I'm not saying that's the only thing to focus on, but we need to build our mass struggles and mass nonviolent actions that will create the mass pressure that will make the politicians do what we think we need them to do. And everybody else has said pretty much what I wanted to say. So, just keep up the fight, talk to people, put our petty differences aside, and build the broadest maximum black, brown, white, united fight unity that we can do.
Thank you. So, comrades, as we come to an end, I want to just mention that Good Morning Revolution shows every Friday at 10:30 Eastern Time live. It's also available on YouTube for those who want to see it after it has aired live. There is also continuing coverage in peoplesworld.org from the front lines in Minneapolis. And thank you, Colton and other comrades who are in Minneapolis for helping to have that coverage. So I look forward to seeing everybody again at 10:30 Eastern Time next week. And I want to thank Colton, Pooja, Ray, and the producers for this important show and an important expression of our total and complete support for the people of Minneapolis in their struggle for dignity and to get ICE out of their communities and for their safety. So stay warm, keep your fighting spirit going, and it's just uplifting for everybody what's going on, what the workers in Minneapolis are doing. So thank you all.